Hey everybody, welcome back to the 118th episode of Taps and Patience. I am AJ with Audacity Micro and Subtract Manufacturing, here with Harrison of Precision Ingenuity. Hi Harrison.
How we doing, AJ?
Oh, a little tired, but all right.
I'm
We're
a
very
lot.
green today between us.
We are. I'm a lot tired.
I heard you had some fun.
Yeah. We had a trip planned this weekend with my wife and some friends, and we went kayaking on the Buffalo. Me and my wife were in a tandem kayak, and then we camped out in a tent last night, and then did a breakfast at the campsite, and then packed up and came back. It's a lot of fun, but I am absolutely wiped. And just to give a little bit of what kind of happened, the Buffalo is probably has had the most rapids I've ever been on in Arkansas. Because I think I've been on the Buffalo before, but not that particular section. And it had a lot of rapids and a lot of really big rocks in the water in the area we were in. And at one point we flipped once, me and my wife, and she actually lost her phone.
Oh no.
Yeah. So she had it in this like pink bag, and it ripped off her, and she had it on a strap around her neck. And when we flipped, it took it off the strap, and then we lost it in the rapids, and we couldn't find it anywhere. But it was like bumper to bumper kayaks and canoes all day, and there was just people everywhere. So every time we saw someone, we just would, hey, have you seen a phone? No, okay. And so we lost it around the halfway point on the trip, and we made it all the way back and loaded everything up, and it was a zoo getting out of there. Went back and got my car and had basically zero cell phone reception. And as soon as I got cell phone reception, within like 2 minutes of me getting cell phone reception again, I got a phone call from one of the places that rents out canoes that someone had turned in her phone.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah. And so on her iPhone, she had the medical emergency set up, and I was listed as an emergency contact. And so they were able to access that with their phone being locked and called us. And they were like 5 minutes from where we were. So we just drove down and picked it up.
Man,
so it was just pretty lucky. Wild. So she was super scared that she's like, I can't believe I lost it. And then we ended up finding it. So good people that turned it in. So we appreciate that. So crazy trip.
That's cool. Did you see the picture I posted on Instagram on the stories?
I've been without internet since Friday.
Oh, fair enough. I was so close to losing my keys yesterday. I was under the impression that we were just going to go drop off our pickup truck so that some friends could move.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got there, I took the truck keys off of like my key ring, and I threw my keys on the roof of the truck, planning on grabbing them later before like going and getting in the car with my wife. But when we were there, we realized that like at this point we could just move them with one truckload of stuff. And so we ended up just kind of helping them move. But we got to the house that we were moving them into, and I went, where are the rest of my keys? And they were still on the roof of my truck.
Oh my word.
About a 20-minute drive. And I got really lucky that one of the keys got caught in the door.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, there's no way they would just ride up there normally. Unless you're like Kansas, where everything is like flat, straight lines or something, and just like no hills or anything.
Yep. I must have opened and closed the passenger door at one point, and the tip of one of the keys got stuck in there.
Wow. That's awesome.
But anyway, this is a podcast about machining.
Mm-hmm.
Now that we've started off with 4.5 minutes of keys and canoes.
Keys and kayaks.
Cell phones.
Yep.
Oh, sorry, kayaks.
Yep. Yeah, it was a mixture of both, but we were all in kayaks, but it was a lot of fun. Yeah. No, not a whole lot really happened last week. Just a lot of stuff going the right way. So not much to like.
That's good.
not much of like excitement of, in this week's tales of dramatic events in my shop. So we've, I guess one thing that was kind of happened that was kind of frustrating is we had ordered the Mist Away Mist Collector, and the 700 was out of stock, so we got the 1100, and we ordered it 2 weeks ago. It was supposed to come in last week, and we were tracking it, and apparently they were out of stock and their website had not updated. And so when they told us that it was going to arrive on this date, they were like, "Oh wait, apparently we don't have enough on the shelf to actually get it there, so it's actually back ordered now." So I was like, "Great!" I mean, that was the whole reason we ordered that one. So
I hate that. Yeah.
that was a little frustrating, but it should show up, I think, this week. I think we got a notification at the end of the week that it had shipped. So, but
I too had a fairly uneventful week. I was in a shop a whole lot, but it was not my shop. And I also made quite a few parts, but they weren't parts for me. This week I have so last week and next week I have some apprentices for Caterpillar at the school. They are going from like operator level to what they call setup operator. For some reason, they're still kind of hesitant to use the word machinist. I guess probably because maybe machinist means programming for them. I don't know, but setup operator. And so we've been, doing things like trimming a vise. We've been doing some of like the machine maintenance stuff, like dialing in a Renshaw probe and running parts. So one of the things I need to do here before tomorrow morning is I want to design a kind of a larger multi-part fixture that we can run some parts through so they can kind of get a little bit of experience with those. And we will both machine the fixture and probably machine some of the like hold down clamps for it. And then I'll have them, put it together and use it a couple times. And maybe I'll go in there and like skew it a little bit on the machine before they run parts, and then they can try to correct for that or whatever.
Yeah. Do like a blind what's wrong with this setup.
Yeah, exactly. Because they know how to operate machines right now. They just don't know much more beyond that.
The number one thing that gets me on crashes, wrong offset.
Yeah. Yes, like we've proven out a couple programs and dialed in some work offsets to get parts more accurate. It actually worked out that our probes weren't particularly calibrated when we came into this class, because that gave them a fair amount of like tweaking they needed to do between Op1 and Op2 to get everything in spec. We've done a couple parts. One of them I designed for this class that I was pretty happy with. It's a stack of like nesting boxes. Well, stacking boxes. Kind of like Gridfinity bins, basically, but without the funky Gridfinity geometry. But if the Op2 is off from Op1, they don't stack well or they don't stack right. And if they're out of tolerance, they don't fit together. Gotcha. So it was a pretty good, I was pretty happy with that as a student part, and I'll probably use that one a lot going forwards. And I can put it on the website for anyone else teaching to use, but it only uses 2 tools. It's just, it was supposed to be a 1/2-inch end mill, but we didn't have 1/2-inch end mills. So it was 16 millimeter end mill and a chamfer tool. So it'd be pretty good for any other class to do.
Fair enough.
But I don't know, for the most part, I've just kind of been in teaching mode, because I have an 8-hour class with these apprentices, and then that's immediately followed by a 4-hour DOC class. So basically I'm at school for 12 hours, like straight teaching, and it's an hour there and an hour back. So that is my whole day.
Any progress on Subtract during that time?
A little bit. And this is the blessing of having other people work for you. The website is working a lot better, and our behind the scenes automations are also working a lot better.
Oh, good.
We've had I believe one order shipped this week. I think it was this week, an order shipped, or last week, whatever you want to call it. Today's Sunday for us, so I suppose it would be last week, an order shipped. And then we have a new one with some relatively large Delrin parts that have a bunch of like funky pipe threads. That'll be shipping probably in the next day or two.
Gotcha.
And both of those were actually Dylan at Got Chips, and he's one of our Patreons, and he's really knocked those out of the park.
Sweet.
So good job, Dylan. They look great.
Great job.
You can go check out pictures on his Instagram if anyone wants to see him, at Got Chips. But
noise. So, yeah. What else?
Jacob is actively working on our Q&A at the moment, so we will have that shortly. Wow, this might be a short episode for us because like things just kind of went well for you, and I've just been teaching.
Yeah, I mean, I love having other people in the shop more and more. It's freeing me up to do a lot.
Yeah. Let's talk about your employees.
Yeah, so I mean, they're both gaining traction. In fact, Ben this week or last week, we had him working on a fusion project where he was designing some Gridfinity boxes for ER collets, which is a project that we've had on the back burner for a while and just haven't had time to really mess with. And so that's been a good project for him to kind of learn fusion and kind of get used to the modeling side. And he works in Blender because he does some animation for game design along with programming. And so it was funny because he's used to be able to just grabbing onto things and just dragging them where they need to go.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, you can't do that in this environment. And so they're in a learning curve. And at the beginning, he's like, oh, this is, I don't like this at all. And then as he's kind of gotten used to it, like he went crazy on the like parameters and like without really being, told that's the best way to do it and whatnot. And like, he knocked it out of the park. You can type in what collet size you want and it's like dynamic and it'll adjust and you can adjust the padding and he's got a middle layer that'll shift up to like put them in there diagonally for more efficient packing them together. And it's just like all driven with equations and math and stuff. And it's just like, it is so cool and it's so dynamic. And it's the kind of modeling that I like to do when I have the time, but I'm usually like trying to brute force, get something out the door and go to the next project. And so to have someone sit down and put a lot of time and effort into it, and then any size that we want, ER 11 through 32 and any size box, and then to have it all dynamically adjust between them. It's a sweet model.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now, how do you feel about him using this time for something that's not necessarily going to turn straight into profits?
So we're having them focus. I want them to get comfortable with all of the different assets that they have that they're going to be using before I start focusing them on doing things that are directly generating profit. So in the background, while he's been doing projects like that, he's been doing things like keeping the lathe running, keeping the UMC running. So he's doing other stuff in the background, but he's got a lot of free time between those. And so I'm using that time for training and other things. I want him to get comfortable in Fusion because eventually I want him to start programming in it. And I want him to get comfortable on the other machines. And so like whenever there's an error or a problem, we're working through that. Actually, Friday was his first hiccup on one of the machines. So his other job, they had a product release or a version release of the software he was working on, and they didn't tell him in advance, and so he didn't know about it. And so I guess something went wrong with the new version right after launch, and they were all scrambling. And so he was on the phone and messaging them and emailing them, and he misloaded a part in the UMC, and it spun out. And he quickly hit the e-stop, and, he was a little jittery and whatnot. And it was just like, dude, it's okay. It's okay. He's like, oh, is this expensive material? Is this, that? And I was like, it's okay. It's okay. I was like, listen, the times that I make the biggest mistakes in my shop is when I'm trying to juggle too many things at once. And I was like, this is the perfect opportunity for you to learn that, like, if you've got too much stuff going on, just slow down and focus on what's important. And we're trying to build systems, because what he had done is he had loaded some parts, but he hadn't torqued them down.
Yep.
So he had put one tool down and he needed to grab the torque wrench, but he was distracted and didn't do it. And so I kind of talked him through some of the systems that we've used or that I use personally to make sure I don't do that same mistake. And that's something that we might end up having to document. And that's something that we kind of talked about a little bit. But like, like I told him, I was like, every tool has a place. And if I'm using this tool and that tool comes next, I don't put the first tool away until I've grabbed and I'm using the next tool. Then that tool goes away. Because if I put that tool away and I never grab the next tool, then and especially on the torque parts, you wouldn't know that they weren't torqued. And so, like, if I need to step away, I'll grab the torque tool and I'll stick it in the hole, or I'll stick I'll stick another tool in a specific location, symbolizing that it's not been torqued, it's loaded but not torqued. And so, like, we kind of went through some of that stuff, and then I told him he could keep the scrap part. I was like, you can have that as kind of like a reminder. But I was like, you're going to make mistakes. We're trying to keep you on as much of a guardrail in the beginning until you get comfortable. But making minor mistakes like that are going to happen. It's okay if it happens once. If it happens twice, depending on what it is, we don't like it. But like if it becomes a repeat thing, then it's a problem. And then we need to address it as a group to make sure that we have the right systems in place to not let that happen.
Yep.
So
yeah, I think that's the right response. It sounds like you stayed pretty cool headed with it.
Oh, it was it, and it it was $2 in material. It wasn't that big of a deal. I was the first one that spun 2 parts within like 2 weeks on that same fixture because of the same problem of being distracted. And so that stuff is bound to happen, but that's why we have them on stuff that's very well proven out, that we have, good procedures on, that are not that complicated. And until they get more comfortable, we're trying to keep them in the safe areas before we let them loose on the actual machines and doing something a little bit more complex. But we've also had them like start cleaning out the machines. I haven't had them load any tools for any setups yet, but like getting comfortable, cleaning out the machine, washing it down, looking at different things, stuff like that.
Cool.
So, because I'm trying to build a foundation, because both these guys that we have are they're green. They know absolutely nothing about machines. So, starting them out from square one.
Sometimes will be a pro and sometimes be a con.
Yeah. Ben is definitely he has the potential to become a very big asset to the company. And so being encouraging and supportive and giving him opportunities to learn without a ton of pressure is kind of what we're focusing on right now. We're doing good. We're not so busy right now. I need him to be doing too much more. And so we have a short list of problems we haven't addressed because we haven't had time in the shop. And so as long as he's keeping those machines running, we're kind of getting him comfortable in the environment. Like I said, we're doing the fusion stuff, which is helping him getting familiar with the modeling side. Eventually, I want to get him comfortable on the programming side. But it's kind of the modeling is what he's more familiar with from his background. So if I get him familiar with that I think that'll help translate over into the actual programming side, because it's a similar thought process.
Yeah. I've spent the last couple of months thinking a lot about, training and the best way of doing it and how to instruct people. There's some things like I feel like I've been able to teach very well, and then some things that I'm still working on. And like speeds and feeds, I have my spiel down for that pretty well. In fact, I should probably turn that into a YouTube video because I think I explain it better than most of the videos that you see on YouTube. But some of the things I've been working on recently is like, a part comes out the wrong size. How do you correct it? And because for me, it's a fairly intuitive process, but for somebody who's newer to it, both on a manual machine and a CNC machine, it seems to be kind of a sticking point.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a sticking point because I've taught it poorly.
Yeah.
So I with this new class, I kind of started doing. I did an experiment, and I'm teaching it to them using the OODA loop. If you're familiar with the OODA loop,
I'm not. Off the
it's
top of my head.
it's a decision making technique, I guess you'd call it. It originally goes back to the Air Force in like Vietnam, like teaching fighter pilots kind of thing.
Oh, okay.
But it's observe, orient, decide, act.
Oh, okay. I think I've heard that, but I've never heard the other term for it.
The OODA loop.
Yeah.
And so for this class, before we got really too far into that stuff, I started on the whiteboard explaining the OODA loop. And then when we're actually like out there troubleshooting some of these problems, it's like, hey, run your OODA loop and figure out what to do.
That's actually, that reminds me of something else that I can talk about, but we'll go ahead and let you finish yours.
With that, I have noticed that it's just kind of an interesting observation. So, you have the OODA loop, observe, orient, decide, act. My Department of Corrections students are really good at the decide and acting part. And some of them just completely struggle with either the observe phase or the orient phase. And for context here, when I teach the OODA loop, I teach orient as basically look at the problem in context. So observe is like figure out what the problem is and look at like everything around it. And then orient is look at like the greater context. And it's just interesting. My Department of Corrections people pretty much, like even thinking about to other classes where I haven't specifically taught the OODA loop, but they suck at the observe and or the orient part. Whereas these apprentices I have, they are much worse at the decide part.
Yeah.
They will understand the problem, but they'll be too hesitant to do anything about it. Whereas with the Department of Corrections students, they will just do stuff without thinking about the consequences or more often without thinking about the greater context.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just thought that was an interesting observation and I wanted to get it out there, but I don't know. Pay attention to the things around you in greater context and you don't go to jail, I think is the conclusion there.
So bouncing off that same conversation, the longer I'm in machining, there's almost always a deeper reason why something goes wrong. And you have to drill down until you figure out why something is going wrong. And so one of the parts for running for Walther is a threaded adapter. And we had to change one of the threading tools that we were using for that because it was out of stock for like 2 months. And so we were using Micron 100 solid carbide threading insert. And the particular style we had been using up until that point, like I said, was out of stock for like 2 months, which is a no-go because we need to keep these going. So we found another one on their site and ended up ordering it. And when we got it in, Weston ended up, the tool was a lot stubbier than the one we were using. And when he went to touch it off, he ended up having one of the other tools in the turret bumped into the probe. And so we had to recalibrate the probe on the lathe, which was a process. And after we did that, the new threading tool was cutting 4 thou deeper than the old one. And it spurred kind of that whole thought process of what's going wrong. Yeah. And so we went through so many different iterations, and we rewrote the program. We ran test programs to, well, if it's doing this, then this should fail. If it's doing this, then this should fail. And I mean, we spent like 2 to 3 hours going through everything we could figure out. And one of the first suggestions I had was because it's less stubby, it's maybe not deflecting as far. But Weston was like, it's deflecting like, the old one couldn't have been deflecting. I think it was like 3 or 4 thou, like there's no way. But I think that's what it was ultimately.
Yeah.
But we did a whole lot of testing before we finally were okay with that. And like Weston was extremely adamant that he's like, we got to drill down and make sure that is the only thing, because he said every time we think something is okay and we just let it slide, it said if it's going to bite us, it'll bite us later, and it'll bite us a lot worse than if we figure it out now. And so we did all sorts of tests and stuff, and the only conclusion we could come to was the fact that it was deflecting. But in that process, we did validate a couple of other tools to a much higher degree than they were previously validated, which was just kind of a happy a happy, I don't know, side quest,
Side effect.
side effect, yeah, of like making sure that everything was good. So, because like in that process, we have one tool that goes inside and cuts the thread relief on the ID, and it's something that has to be measured on our inspection report. And until we get a CMM, we don't have a way to go under and measure that undercut on the inside. And so we've just been touching off the tool, and more or less, if the thread goes all the way down past it, it's like, because like our thread gauge, if you check it, it should go past and bottom out against the bottom face, and we can tell if it does that. But that's the only check, is have we gone deep enough? Is it a problem? And so, but in that process, we ended up running a test program to see if that was cutting on size, and we cut on the very tip of the part, and it was within like a tenth or two of what we were telling it to cut. So like we ended up validating that tool out to a higher degree than we had previously. So that was nice.
Speaking of things that are nice, we have Patreons. Those Patreons support us and help us to be able to do a better job at the show. Because of them, we're able to have like Jacob, who puts together our show notes and our list of Patreons. Those Patrons include, but are not limited to, Devin at Sinister Machine Works, James N., Ben at Prickly Pear Prototypes, Cam S., Shep at Alderson Prototyping, Jacob at Zonham Precision, Jason S., Joshua H., Christian Z., Dylan at Got Chips, Freaky Climber, Prescott at 1Z2Z Systems, Trey V., Guy L., Alexander B., Scott Design the Everything, Jamie at JSpec Engineering, Chris Syke, EJ at Nocturnal Welding, and Chris at Thoughtbomb Design. Oh, I said and too soon, because and ever, Jake Brownson. So thank you, Patrons. We appreciate all of you. Those are all of our Patrons at the $10 or a month, or $10 a month or more tiers. We also have Patreons at cheaper tiers, but we appreciate all of you guys. You can, in fact, even join for free. And if you join for free, you do not get early access to the episodes like everybody else does, but you can participate in the weekly Q&A, which, thanks to Jacob, has actually been fairly weekly. So, Q&A questions. Oh, by the way, we have a website too, tapsofpatience.com. We have a page for each one of our episodes with a searchable text transcript. Okay, so Faro Technologies. Speaking of transcripts, in a previous episode, Harrison mentions an obscure video on how to handle Op2 Stock. Can you please share this?
Okay, so I was thinking about that, and I know exactly what you're talking about. So I'm going to give a little context around this. So I was having a problem when I was doing the programming for the magwells that we did, where I had to have and I was doing that fixture where I had op1s on the top and op2s on the side, and I had a model of it in the op1 position and a model of it in the op2 position, and they were in two different locations, and I needed a way to transfer the stock from op1 to op2 in a new position in the same model, so that I could program it in both locations and have rest machining transfer between the two. So that's the context for what we're asking for here. And to answer your question, I'm going to have to dig and see if I can find that, because I think I emailed or sent it to one other person after that video. And then I don't know if I saved it or anything. I'm going to have to go dig and see if I can figure out the person I sent that video to, and see if I saved it or bookmarked it anywhere. But it was an extremely helpful video. I think it had like less than 100 views when I found it. So it was like an obscure, hard to find video. And I don't know if there's a way we can look back and see what episode that was, or if you can comment what
If
episode.
only we had a searchable website.
Yeah, I was gonna say maybe we can find that, and that'll give me a time frame I can look back in. So I'll see what I can find. If I can find it, I'll try to send it to Jacob so we can kind of get it posted somewhere.
You weren't just like exporting the stock as an STL and reusing that, were you?
No. It transferred. So like you could update Op1 and it would update the stock for Op2. Like you didn't have to save and do any of that other stuff that's a pain in the butt.
Yeah, that sounds really useful.
It's extremely useful. But there's a process to get it to recognize that it's the same model.
Yeah.
And to transfer it over.
Well, here's a fun fact for people that I knew and then I forgot about and then I rediscovered when I was at the big forging company. If you simulate a toolpath and then at any point you can right click on your on the model in the screen, like basically just click anywhere in the big 3D environment screen. One of the options when you right click is to export that as stock, or if you wanted to load in stock, you could do so as well. And it saves it as an STL.
Yeah.
That was handy when we were going between Fusion and Power Mill, because you could save the stock in Fusion and then can pick up rest machining in a different CAM package.
Yeah. And that's something that I've tried to do, but I've never actually been successful with. So
doing it in two different CAM packages, or
no, saving the rest material as an object or as like a step model. So but
and you just right click on it and hit save as STL.
Yeah, but for whatever reason, like the few times I've tried it, I've had something go wrong, but I haven't needed it that often, so I haven't worried about it. That was a long time ago, too.
It is a fairly obscure niche use case.
All right, we got another question.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I'm just playing in Fusion.
Trying it live. We're doing it live.
So Jamie at JSpec Engineering says 2 questions. Has AJ played at the Anchor Point, and do you guys listen to the Lone Machinist podcast? I should start here. Jamie, I have played with it, and I keep meaning to do videos on it, but I've just been teaching so much and just like away from home that I haven't gotten to it. Your 0 point has been used in a number of classes. I've used that as an illustration a couple times, both in like my machining classes and in my the metrology class I did. For the metrology class, I was talking about like SMED and set, don't adjust. And the, one of the easy ways to do that is with a 0 point. I used that when I was talking to we'll just call them a prime government contractor. And I was trying to teach them about 0 points because they were just buying new mills. They were spending millions of dollars on mills because they didn't know how to set them up quickly. And I was like, have you guys ever heard of a 0 point? And they were like, no. And so I had that in the car with me. That thing has traveled around Indiana several times. So I have played with it. I have not used it yet. I'm probably going to get it set up on my Haas, but I've been just out of the shop so much that I haven't gotten the chance to. And I have listened to at least 2 of your podcasts. I listened to the one where you first talked about the Anchor Point, and then one other one.
Yeah, I've listened to 2 or 3 as well. Honestly, I haven't caught up on it. There's a lot of podcasts I'm behind on. I'm behind on Dylan. I'm behind on The Bomb. I would trying to listen to The Lone Machinist, but for the last few weeks, even though I'm starting to get less busy, I've been really busy.
Yeah. I need to get caught up on theirs more. My problem is I've been listening to them on YouTube instead of in my podcast player. And when I listen to podcasts, those when I'm driving, which I've been doing a lot of lately, but that's obviously much easier to do when it's already queued up in your podcast player. So I just need to get subscribed to my. I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to do that on my phone. While I do that, Jake Brownson says HSK versus BT/CT question mark, aka favorite tool tape
I
or
have
opinions on
not.
tool tapers.
I have not used HSK yet. I have only had discussions with people about it, and I am of the opinion that I want to get HSK and I want to play around with it and test it out. Some people swear by it. Some people say you don't need HSK, you can get by with just BT or CAT. And I understand both viewpoints, but I don't have any experience to back it up. Other than I was planning on getting HSK on the UMC, but that didn't quite happen just because we couldn't justify the cost difference. And
It's
we needed to get it off the
expensive.
ground pretty fast. So we were able to share tooling between it and the VF. So in the short term, with what we had in the shop, it made sense just to do CAT instead of HSK on that machine. Although I do desperately want to get HSK in on some machine in the future, just to play with it and see a big difference, if there is a big difference, and how it shows up.
Yeah, I'm in the same category. Sure, in theory, it sounds great. On paper, it definitely looks like the best, but I can't speak to it directly. I can tell you I like BT30 better than ISO 20.
Yeah, which one of our listeners reached out, and I think they posted some stuff on Instagram of that Cat 60.
Yeah.
Which was insane.
I thought it was fake. I thought they had like an ISO 20 tool holder and they were putting it next to a Cat 40. They were like, look at how big this is. No, it's huge.
Yeah. Yeah. Not only that, but he said he had an ISO 10.
Yeah.
He was supposed to send me a photo. I want to see a photo of an ISO 10 next to the Cat 60. Cause like your office mill, that's still it's an ISO 20. Yeah, so it'd be smaller than that. So I want to see that. I want to see those two next to each other in a photo.
Yeah. I also want to see the HSK like 160 or whatever the large sizes that someone said existed.
I do know that like at IMTS, whenever I was at the RegoFix booth and I was looking around at some of their tools, they had like an HSK that was like the size of like an ER11, call it, but it was like an HSK thing. I was like, that is so cool. I want to see the machine that uses that.
I wonder if that was the one that the Solo used.
No, it was much bigger than that. I mean, because this was like a tiny tool holder. Okay. But the Solo's probably the equivalent of an ISO 20, which would be...
Yeah, it was.
Which would be bigger.
I think it was an HSK 25?
Maybe. That sounds right.
From Murray, Harrison, what are your thoughts on UMC versus VF with a trunnion? Does the UMC do anything that the VF can't, or vice versa?
So the UMC, I feel a lot more comfortable on. I've had enough experiences with the VF and its trunnion that in theory it can take really big cuts, but it only takes a snap tool or a slight bump, and then you're spending a day recalibrating everything. And so while you should be able to whale on it, I get nervous if I use anything bigger than a 3/8 on it. I've used up to a 3/4 on it before, like one time. And I think that 3/4 tool is what ended up snapping the jaws on the Haas self-centering vise that I had back in the day. And so now I try to keep it to 3/8 or smaller. And if I use 1/2 inch or anything like that, it's usually for reach to like finish something that's really long on a long surface. And I usually take it really slow. But on the UMC, I have no such fears. It is a lot more rigid. There's nothing that I can bump to knock it out of alignment quite like I can. Like if there was a crash, it would still be bad. But like if I break a tool, it's not like I'm going to shift the casting like I would shifting the trunnion on the table. So like,
which might be a good thing or a bad thing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you would hurt it. Like if I just had a tool break in it, I don't think it would hurt it.
Yeah. Not from a tool breakage, but if you were like,
Yeah, I mean, if
had an engraving macro and went a little too deep, then
yeah, I could see some
it
problems
might
with something.
shift something.
I could see something like that, but from daily use, apart from a crash, I feel the UMC is a lot more planted and rigid, and it can obviously do much larger parts. Um, so one of the things I really like about the UMC now that I have it over the VF is that I do a lot of parts that are anywhere from 11 to, I guess, up to now. I think I've done a plate that was 30 inches that had holes tapped in the end, and the 30-inch plate I couldn't do on the VF period, but I've done up to, I want to say, a 20-inch plate where I'm grabbing onto it with the trunnion vertical. That way I can drill and tap
Mm-hmm.
the ends. And because I can't drop it down lower than the table on the VF, once I've clamped onto it with the trunnion at 90, whatever distance above it is just floating in the wind, and it's very vibraty, and I have to go really slow. Versus on the VF, because I have all that distance below it, I can put in like a 30-inch piece, grab onto it, and still have the jaws be right at the face I'm drilling and tapping.
You said VF. Did you mean
Or
UMC there?
UMCs, yeah, sorry.
Okay.
UMC, I still have like 30 inches below that I can hang a part down and still drill and tap the end, and grab right where I'm doing the drilling and tapping. So it's a heck of a lot more rigid and no vibrations. So much better there.
So you like it?
I love the UMC. It's been great. I
What
I've
was what was the cost delta between the two machines? Do you remember?
So I got the, I want to say about 25 grand between the
Oh,
two.
that's not that much.
No, I got, and it would actually be less. They would almost be identical, except I got the VF on a like a 20 or 30% discount because of it was an end of the year sale,
Hmm.
and it was a combo with the trunnion. And so
Fair.
I basically got the trunnion for free whenever I got the VF. And so if you paid sticker price for both of them, it would be less than 20 difference between the two.
Jacob wants to know, for each of us, if we had the opportunity to demo any machine in our shop for free for a year, what machine would you choose?
That is a very good question. For me, it would probably be some sort of dual spindle lathe with a milling head.
Hmm.
It could be something like what Saunders and Grimsville have, like a Willy,
Ooh,
or it could be something
yeah.
bigger, like what Doosan or Mazak in their Intergrex line, something like that. Um, I think the Doosan is the SVX, and I know other brands have other machines. It just depends on the type of part I was trying to demo it with. That would really determine which one, but it would probably be some sort of machine that has a B axis with live tooling.
I was gonna say one of the small 5-axis pallet pool machines, like the Med Center, but it might have to be a Willman. Yeah, I think that might have to be the answer for me. I don't think it is the right answer for my shop, especially with the parts that I'm making right now. A pallet pool would be better,
Mm-hmm.
but if I'm not paying for it, like, hey, I'm
Yeah,
going to take the fun one.
I had the perfect part that came across my desk for a Willman, or some machine like that, where it was a turned part with a lot of milled components on it,
Yeah.
and I. It's funny because I actually had some people that toured my shop afterwards that had worked for this company, and the company in question asked, they had their internal price, which was ridiculously low, like cost of material. And then I asked the guys that had worked there about it, and they said that's China price. So they're just quoting you versus China. And I was like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. And so their internal price is just them outsourcing to China, more or less. And but at the volume that they wanted, if the numbers that they gave me were anywhere remotely true, then having a dedicated machine that could do that, like a Williman, would have been the perfect fit for it.
Nice.
So, but I can't justify going out and buying a machine for that project without something.
Getting the PO.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so, and they were kicking the tires, and they just didn't want to.
They want the China price.
Yeah, they just want the China price. So,
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like I have a quote hanging right now that's like $91,000. And if that lands, then I'm immediately getting a robot. But I don't think I'm going to get that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially considering the last time I made these parts, it was for a quarter as much. So,
yeah. Yeah. And so it might have been a blessing in disguise, because talking to those guys that came by our shop, it sounds like this company likes to spit out really big numbers and get people kind of invested. And then as soon as they find someone that can do it for 5 cents cheaper, they'll pull all the production and go with that company.
yep.
So I don't really want to get into a war like that. So if they want to fight for bottom dollars, that's not really the market I'm trying to compete in. Like I want to be competitive, but there's also a value difference between what I'm doing. Like I'm not going to go down to the very bottom rung, because the corners you have to cut to get there is not a direction I want to go.
That's a realization I've come to with Subtract, is that like as we're quoting different jobs for different people, the low cost work just doesn't justify it for our system and for our shops. What does work is higher complexity, higher value stuff with a faster lead time. So I think we're definitely going to have to pursue the prototyping route. I still think one of our good customers, not that we've ever actually had one yet, but my theory is that we will work well with places like robot integration companies or other people who are, doing big, installs or something where they just need good parts fast.
Yeah.
And I think good parts fast is going to be our thing.
Yeah.
Because we can't compete with China, and I have no desire of trying. I don't want to, burden our shops with low value work. Like we'll let Xometry take care of that, and we'll do the higher dollar value. Make sure your part is good the first time. We'll get it to you fast with no hassle.
Yeah. And what's funny is this company's already tried having it machined at a couple different places, and it's a high complexity part that they want for pennies on the dollar.
Yeah.
So
I mean, if I was buying a product, or was making a product and buying parts for it, yeah, I would want things good, cheap, and fast. But you get to choose too, as we all know.
Yeah.
So we're gonna do good and fast. Xometry can try to do everything, or they can do cheap and fast. I think it's probably what Xometry does, cheap and fast.
I don't know if Xometry would be considered cheap, at least when you compare like their US prices compared to like what I do stuff for.
Yeah.
Because like they have really high margins in there. Now, not for everything. Like some of the stuff, like absolutely they're a lot cheaper than what I can do it for. But like the stuff that we're good at, they're a lot more expensive to do the same thing.
Yeah, and pricing, that's a whole thing. Maybe we should talk about that more. We've gotten deeper into it.
Yeah.
Fun fact, we can predict Xometry's prices really, really, really accurately. Like shockingly accurately with, the way that we're quoting. Because we occasionally kind of benchmark ourselves against Xometry. Like we had a part the other day. It was kind of like a tool room part. Like it's something they're going to use to make other stuff. And I was quoting it and going, this is too expensive. Like this person's never going to buy it at this price. But it was also like how much, like it's just what it cost. And we compared it to Xometry, and sure enough, we were a little bit cheaper than like the US premium, but a little bit more expensive than their overseas option. And it's like, yeah, there's no way this person is ever actually going to buy this, but it's just the price of things. And sure enough, they did not place that order. When I sent the email, I was like, okay, here's the price for one. But if you buy two, it's almost like half the unit cost.
Yeah.
Just to be like, it's not our problem. It's kind of your problem, but
yeah. And that's just how it is. And like, that's what I was trying to tell this customer. It was like, listen, I can predict the price all day long, but until I actually make it, that's when the rubber meets the road. And that, at the volumes that they were trying to get me to quote, it's like, I need to make one to know. And if I had the time, I would have just made a couple parts because they weren't that expensive. But unfortunately, it was at a time where I was really busy and I couldn't work them in without justifying it, because otherwise I would have been behind on other customers' current orders. And so we just didn't do that. And I should have. I 100% should have.
I know I'm kind of stuck on my own thing here and talking past you, but I heard that Fictive has stopped using U.S. partners, that they're all overseas now. Fictive was like a Xometry competitor, a higher end Xometry competitor, but it seems like they've gone entirely overseas now.
I don't even know who Fictive is.
They were just a higher end Xometry competitor.
Oh, okay.
It was one that I looked at, but there was something they needed an LLC, and at the time I wasn't an LLC or something like that. But apparently it wouldn't have been worth the investment anyway. But I think that basically just leaves Subtract and Xometry now as being the only two people in the U.S. doing this thing.
What's PCB Weight? Who makes their stuff?
China. It's all overseas.
Oh, okay.
It's a Chinese company with their own manufacturing facility in China.
That's what I figured, but I wasn't sure.
There's also like Proto Labs, which I believe is U.S. based, or at least partially U.S. based.
Yeah, that's the other one.
But they don't have a network. They just have really, really, really big shops.
Yeah, and you saw that, or you've heard that Send Cut Send is bringing on stuff.
Everybody keeps telling me about that. It's like, I don't really want to compete against Send Cut Send, but
yeah,
I think Send Cut Send is going to go more for like what they already do for their sheet metal stuff, which is lower prices, kind of more for the hobby market. The guys making battle bots or whatever.
Oh no, they're gonna go for high volume stuff. I feel like like I mean they'll get onesie twosie stuff in there, but like I feel like they're whatever market segment they enter, they're gonna end up owning more or less. Wherever that ends up.
I'm disappointed to be competing against them, but I'm like, what they're doing is really exciting, and it sounds like they're working with Toolpath, and they're doing some really cool stuff.
Yep.
Send Cut Send. If you want me to do a shop tour of your factory, I would love to come do a shop tour.
Yeah.
So
I think Chris Zapp
even
is
though
also
I'm technically
helping
a
him.
competitor, but
I think Chris Zapp is also
working
helping
with them.
Yeah. And I know there's probably a bunch of others as well.
But it's gotta be nice to start these things with money.
Oh yeah.
So we're just cash flowing Subtract. To date, I've put about $800 into the company total, and everything else we're just cash flowing. So
nice.
I'm basically just gonna budget some investment monthly, but it's not gonna be like everything else I've started with where I've put a bunch of money up front. Mm-hmm. It'll slow down our growth, but is what is.
Yep. Well, that's about all the questions I saw.
Yep, I'm just about out of time. I need to go celebrate my 9-year-old's birthday.
All right. Well, thanks for hanging out with us, guys. For not having a lot happening, we ended up with a lot more to talk about, so that's always good. We appreciate the questions. And yeah, I'd still like to try to get Weston on here at some point. I know some people have wanted that, so maybe me and AJ will sit down and figure that out. So until next time, this has been Harrison with Precision Ingenuity, signing out with AJ from Audacity Micro and Subtract Manufacturing. Have a good one. Taps and patience, our daily grind. In this machine shop, we'll always find joy and struggles, all intertwined. Taps and patience, one of a kind.